Because on counterintelligence matters dealing with U.S. personal information of a very sensitive nature, the Office of the DNI and the DNI does not have that type of operational responsibility. And what we try to do is to make sure that there is as little exposure of that information as possible. I would keep General Clapper informed about the nature of my engagements, but the materials that were shared with the Bureau would not have been shared with the DNI.
Do you know if the Bureau opened a matter? Well, first of all, when was that? With as much specificity as you can give us, when did you refer that information to the Bureau?
Would you accept last year as the answer? It was during the summertime, and but even previous, there are ongoing sharing of information with the Bureau, and so it was over the course of the year.
All right. In conclusion, because I'm out of time, sometime in the summer, you shared the information with Director Comey at the Bureau.
Sometime in the summer, there was information that the CIA had that was shared with the Bureau, but it wasn't the only period of time where such information was shared with the Bureau.
Good enough. Thanks.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Swalwell, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director. Since you passed that information to the FBI Director, have you reviewed the FBI's development of that evidence or any other evidence?
I am unaware of what the Bureau has done with that information, and I have no knowledge of anything even that the agency has done since January 20th.
Are you aware of what the Bureau has briefed this committee with respect to evidence of collusion?
I watched Jim Comey's hearing and his comments, and I've gone through his transcript, so I'm aware of it, yes.
Are you aware of what the FBI has briefed this committee in a classified setting with respect to evidence of collusion?
No, I'm not. Totally not.
Director, May 10th of this year produced an unsettling image inside the Oval Office. President Trump standing and laughing with Russia's Ambassador Kislyak and Foreign Minister Lavrov. It's been further reported that President Trump shared highly sensitive code word information with Russia, putting at risk U.S. lives and jeopardizing sources and methods. Director, are the Russians worthy of receiving such information in the manner alleged?
I believe it's important for the U.S. Intelligence to provide to any of our foreign partners any information related to terrorist threats to foreign countries or their citizens. And that's why I authorized the provision of classified information numerous times to the Russians that I believe saved Russian lives. As I mentioned, there is an appropriate manner and procedure for doing that. They need to be followed scrupulously so that there's not going to be a undermining
Director,
of those collections.
You warned Bortnikov that there would be consequences if they meddled in our elections. When you look at that picture and the manner in which allegedly classified information was conveyed to the Russians, do you see consequences for their actions?
Again, I don't know the totality of the actions that have been taken against the Russians. I know that, again, the Obama administration in January took actions against them. So I believe that depending on how this investigation proceeds by the FBI and special counsel, as well as by the work of the committees. And I agree that the appointment of a special counsel should not in any way stop these committees, intelligence committees in the Senate and the House from doing its work, because you're supposed to be looking at what do we need to do to strengthen our system so that we're better prepared to it. So I believe that consequences need to be levied on the Russians for it, but I would defer to policymakers in Congress to decide that.
Director, with respect to the contacts between Russia and Trump campaign persons that you referenced earlier, and whether they were innocent or benign contacts, when you see a multiplicity of contacts between one country and one campaign, when does it, in your mind, when you're deciding whether to refer it to the FBI, when does it move from mere coincidences to a pattern? And in this case, when did it?
I guess it's all sort of very sui generis as far as the instances are concerned, but as I said, there was a backdrop there of known Russian efforts to interfere in our election. And there were a variety of activities taking place that wondered whether or not they were part of that campaign and strategy. We don't have a totality of insight into all the things that the Russians were doing, I left it up to the professionals, the counterintelligence and Russian experts, to make sure that whatever information that they deemed appropriate to share with the Bureau because it could be relevant to their investigation, they did that. So I wasn't the one to make decisions, share this with Bureau, share this with. It was based on long-held practices on the part of the CIA to make sure that we're not holding back from our Bureau colleagues.
Director, there is what is referred to as consciousness of guilt evidence. That's when somebody lies about a material fact, and that fact, the fact of them lying, can be used against that person because it would be, in essence, an effort to cover up what happened. Meaning, if you were telling the truth, you wouldn't have anything to cover up. With respect to some of the contacts that you've referred to between Russia and Trump campaign officials, are you aware of any of those U.S. persons who had contacts with Russia either making false statements about those contacts or failing to disclose those contacts?
I think that's something that we can pursue in closed session.
And Director, with respect to the contacts that you have seen, have you ever seen in your history working as an intelligence official this number of contacts between a foreign adversary and a presidential campaign?
I think our collection systems have increased over the years, and so I don't know whether or not it's a result of better collection or because there were more contacts this time than not. I just do not have a basis to make a determination about that.
Thank you. Yield back.
Gentleman is back. Dr. Winster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, for being here today and your candor in this conversation. Have you ever been asked to give your opinion to the FBI about whether intelligence you gathered should lead to an investigation? Do they engage you in that way? You said there's FBI engaged in the CIA, so I didn't know if they have an opinion or ask your opinion on that.
Well, we would make a referral to the Department of Justice in many instances when we saw classified information appear in the public in an unauthorized fashion. And so that referral is made to the Department of Justice to determine whether or not there should be a follow-up investigation. And it's the FBI that then takes a look at the circumstances and makes the decision. So that would be the referral we make.
Okay. And we've pretty much established that Russian Soviet Union, they've tried to meddle with our elections for years. Now, you came in as director after the last election. And which leads me to something Mr. Himes was talking about. He says, the rules of the Russian playbook or whatever, they try to build relationships, especially with influential Americans, and you would agree with that. That's one of the things that you're kind of looking out for, these relationships. At least I believe that's what you've said. So I'm just trying to understand process here a little bit. What sets up a red flag? What type of conversation do you hear that says, maybe we need to take a little bit further look into this or refer it on? And I can't help but think back to the previous election when we see on videotape President Obama says, this is my last election. After my election, I have more flexibility. And President Medvedev, who he's speaking to, says, I understand. I'll transmit this information to Vladimir, and I stand with you. Now, you talk about the playbook. It sounds like I stand with you. That's a pretty strong relationship. This is certainly an influential American, and we're talking openly about elections. So again, I'm not trying to launch another investigation here, but I am concerned about the process. So you weren't sitting as a director at that time, but, as Mr. Swalwell used the term, that's a pretty disturbing image, I think, to a lot of Americans, is what kind of relationship. So would you question this interaction where that type of conversation is taking place? And again, I'm just trying to understand process of how it moves from CIA to FBI to DOJ.
It was a direct conversation between the heads of government and state between two countries. I'm not going to respond to you.
Okay, but I think that's what we're talking. I'm just, again, trying to get some understanding of what sets off a red flag. And when do you refer to law enforcement? I know you weren't the director at that time, but boy, that just hits all the things you were talking about in the playbook. Elections, influential American, and building a relationship. I stand by you. So just, again, trying to get to the substance there. But that's interesting. You can't respond to a personal conversation, but this is what we're talking about. Anyway, with that, I yield back.
I try to
Go ahead.
I try to avoid getting involved in political issues, partisan issues, and so with respect to Mr. Winstrup, I just will not recognize that question.
Thank you. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Dr. Winstrup. Congressman Rooney and you were discussing generally the motive, and I think it is, let's just assume it's given that the Russians did not like Secretary Clinton, did not like President Obama for that matter, and desired negative things for her. But they also thought she was going to win. Was it your testimony that all of the information stolen was not publicly disseminated?
No, I said if they had collected additional information, as I think was implied, that the effort to try to further hurt her, if she became president, that information, any type of derogatory information about her, could have been husbanded for post-election period.
All right. But do you know if negative information was husband, to use your word, and not disseminated?
Again, I think that would be inappropriate to talk about in an open session like this.
Is it inappropriate to both? I get not asking you about the nature of it. Is it inappropriate to answer yes or no whether or not that information was husband but not disseminated?
My request would be that we could talk about that in closed session.
Okay. I'll honor your request, and we'll talk about it in a little bit.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Castro, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Director Brennan, for your testimony here today. Over the course of the last several months, the intelligence agencies have been berated by the President for the possibility of leaks. Are you aware of his tweets and other criticisms he's made about leaking in the intelligence agencies?
I know that there have been a number of allegations made publicly about intelligence officials being responsible for those leaks. Yes, I'm aware of that.
Are you aware of a story that came out yesterday that said, quote, 3 White House staffers have been identified for leaking classified info. POTUS will fire, quote, multiple people when he returns to D.C.
I'm unaware of that story or the facts, if any, underneath it.
If the story is true, and we don't know whether it is or not, but if it's true that there may have been people who leaked classified info at the White House, first, could you tell us, it seems like an obvious question, should be an obvious answer. Are there people at the White House that would have classified information that they could leak to journalists?
White House officials, if they have the appropriate security clearances based on their position, they would have access to classified information, yes.
Okay. And then the second part of that is, if the White House has determined that leaks are coming from within their operation, could you tell us how they would go about determining that? How would they figure out that they have leakers in the White House?
If there is a sense that there are unauthorized disclosures of classified information from within the White House, I think it's imperative that the FBI be brought into the matter so that there can be an appropriate investigation to determine whether or not that conduct was criminal or not. And there shouldn't be just a independent investigation that takes place. They can do some efforts to try to contain any hemorrhaging of information, but it really is the responsibility of law enforcement and the Bureau to investigate criminal leaks of classified information.
Oh, thank you. Now, I have some questions about the IC assessment itself and the declassified report, because there has been a lot of disinformation and confusion about the intelligence assessment, and it's been attacked also. So